Brock Glenn going to start this game, and this is a situation. It was so funny to me, Richie, and I'm going to call some people out, not by name because I'm a coward, but no, not just because I don't need the beef. I don't need the fight. But it was interesting to me, and obviously the reason Brock is starting this game is because of the injury to DJ. Like I said last week on here that I thought you'd let DJ wear the SMU game. You'd let him wear the Clemson game. You'd let him play against his old team. Hey, man, you came in. We'll let you play the first 6, but then we're going to move on. And then you'd have the bye week to get Brock or whomever ready. That's what I thought was going to happen anyway. I don't have any inside information. Mike didn't tell me that. Ingram didn't tell me that. Derek Ray didn't tell me that. Like, nobody told me that, right? Like, I'm just guessing. It's kind of how I think it was going to work out anyway. DJ breaks his hand or breaks a finger in his hand, the throwing hand. You move on a week faster. But people begged for Brock, Richie, from the Boston College game on. They were chanting his name in the Boston College game. Brock gets announced as the starter, gets announced as the co-starter, right? Like they list him on the depth chart. And immediately people, when you're doing poorly, people are just mad no matter what.
Yeah.
Everyone just started saying like, well, I can't believe you're starting him now. Like, I mean, they didn't know about the broken finger at that point, but immediately the narrative was like, how could Norvell do this? How could Norvell put Brock Glenn in against Clemson? And it was just funny to me because I knew he was hurt at that point. Like I put a tweet out that he was banged up and probably going to be out for the year. So I kind of knew in that moment, and, not saying I know everything or whatever, but I did get some insight that he was injured and said that. Like, he's hurt, he's not going to play, and I expect Brock to play going forward. But it was funny to watch the reaction of people that had begged for Brock for like 5 weeks, finally get Brock, and then be like, I'm pissed off that you're starting him against Clemson. It really just does kind of show how fragile we are right now, that like even the things we ask for, we then complain about. So, I don't know. We'll talk about that before we get into Brock actually playing, I guess.
Yeah, and that happens. And you know what? I went to Florida State during the Drew Rutherford, Xavier Lee years, and there's an old thing for a bad team. The most favorite player on that team for the fan base is always the backup quarterback, right? It's just what it's going to be. I said on the show weeks ago that I was done with DJ, ready to move on, and I hate that it's an injury that made it happen, but it sucks for Brock that here we are now. In his third career start after starting against Louisville and Charlotte in the ACC title game, then being thrown to the Wolves against Georgia with no receivers in the Orange Bowl, now is going to be against probably the best defense Florida State sees all year against Clemson. And I hate that it came to this because I would have loved for DJ to be able to just take this game. Maybe he finds some magic against his old team. Probably wasn't going to happen, but just give him that chance. And then you move on at that point. But I said weeks ago that it's time to move on. And how good would it have been for him to get on the field last week against SMU? I'm not saying we win the game. We probably still lose it. Probably still lose it by a lot if he starts. But the fact that Brock is now thrown into this situation, and now we're one play away from being forced to throw Luke Kromenhoek into the fire, this is not a good situation heading into Saturday night, TJ. Not at all.
Yeah, it's not ideal in any situation. And I agree. It would have been great if Brock could have played against Memphis. Or I'm sorry, against SMU last week. I mean, in all reality, Mike was still trying to win games, right? And I'm not a Mike apologist here on this because Mike's in a world of trouble that he needs to figure out a way to pull himself out of. Let's just be very frank and very blunt about that. Just big picture. But I do think Mike was still trying to win games. I think, against the worst teams on your schedule, you try and win games if you can, because people may argue about this, but I do think it was important for the team to try and get to a bowl game if they could. They obviously can't now. In theory they could, but probably are not now. But hindsight being 2020, if you knew you were going to lose a few more games, I wish you just started him for Memphis, giving him but you weren't going to bench DJ after 2 games. I get that. But man, hindsight being what it is, I wish you'd have given Brock the first team reps and let him play against Memphis, and then let him play against Cal, and then let him play against SMU. And then I'd feel a little bit better about his chances here against Clemson. Man, it's going to be tough. There's no doubt about it. You mentioned they're probably the best or the second best, top 2 for sure. Notre Dame's got a good defense too, but it's one of the best defenses between them, Notre Dame, and Miami that you're going to see all year. And to have to start against that, again, fortunately, he did start in an ACC championship game. He did start with a month of experience being the signal caller for, not really a month of experience, no, because Tate kind of deuced out less than a week before. So Tate was taking a lot of those first team reps. Appreciate that, man. But what are your expectations for Brock in this game? Like, how do you even kind of quantify that? Like, what do you want to see from him? And what do you think when you think about Brock Lynch starting this game? I'll get right back to chatting about Florida State football, but first I want to take a very quick second and tell you guys about Survival Meds. I've told you about them a couple of times, but they have some awesome supplements that they've sent me, and I've tried, and I've loved the results. They've got not only a daily, pretty standard multivitamin that's called their Force Multiplier, but my favorite is their Test Fire, because after just a few days, I've noticed a difference in my energy levels. Got more to come with them soon, but as of now, if you feel like your energy is dropping or you just know you need to be on a multivitamin because life's getting after you and you're getting a little bit older, go check out my friends over at Survival Meds. Listen, they do extremely good work in not only our law enforcement community, but also they do great work with our vets, retired and active military. Make sure that you go check out Survival Med, some of the best in the business that you can get. I've had a great experience with them so far, and I'm excited to tell you about more of them in the future.
It's hard to say because I don't think he's going to have much time to throw. He's still a young guy. I think he's still a freshman by eligibility standards. It's tricky. And he lost half of his quote unquote redshirt freshman season due to being injured and not being able to even practice even a scout team. And as silly as that sounds, that helps a lot. I have very low expectations for Brock this week. Just looking at his career stats, he's 19 for 55. That's a 34.5 completion percentage. Again, that's Louisville. That's Georgia. A couple reps in a couple games earlier this year. 4.2 yards per an attempt. Not great, but again, it's a different sample size. And he does not really have, outside of Ja'Kai Douglas, who's, 5'8" on a good day, 5'9". What receivers, proven commodities do you have? You hope Lawrence Toafili can help him out of the backfield. I think Mike Norvell, he's going to want to try to establish some semblance of a rush game and try and shorten this game as much as possible. I think you're not going to see up tempo at all. I think you're going to see Florida State running the game clock down as low as possible to try and, normally Florida State, a Mike Norvell offense, would want 12, 13, 14 possessions. I think Mike Norvell will be more than happy with a 7 or 8 possession game. Is Florida State able to dictate that? I don't think so. You just got to hope that, as far as Brock goes and expectations, just make the right reads. Even if you miss a player or you throw an interception, if you're throwing to the right guy, that's what I want to see. I want to see what command of the offense does he have? And I don't expect him to have total command at all. He's not got all the first team reps. These guys are not entirely familiar with him. DJ's got all those reps. But is he progressing through his reads? And again, that pass rush is going to be a problem. But is he throwing the ball to the right person? I don't care if it's a bad throw or, if it gets tipped at the line or picked off. Is he throwing the ball to the right person? That's what I want to see. And I kind of want to see what his mobility looks like. But I hope Mike doesn't run him too much because, again, we're one play away from a true freshman coming into the game.
Yeah, I will say this. I've spoken with a couple of people, had a couple of phone calls today about this. And I, certainly not going to break any news here, but then I'll kind of give some insight on what I think things could end up looking like. I obviously expect them to shorten the playbook and make it more vanilla. I really expect them to try to control as much clock as they can, both offensively and defensively, just to try and help Brock and try and help the game in general. Mike understands what's about to be facing him. And, I don't know that you're going to a true like four corners, basketball type offense, but I do think you're trying to play like that a little bit, right? You're not taking a bunch of shots. You're not like play action on the first play to try and get Benson because even if you score on the first play of the game and you feel great at 7-0, that's just an extra possession for Clemson, right? Like would I rather score on the first possession of the game and it take 14 seconds, or would I rather have 2 6-minute drives in the first quarter that culminate in 3 points? I might rather have, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're trading 4 points there, but like from a time perspective, I might as well rather just have the 2 long drives that use up 12 minutes of the clock and you get 3 points out of it, right? So, yeah, is that the best scenario? But just for example, I think they'll try and shorten the game. I think they'll do a lot of stuff that's side to side, trying to take advantage of some speed, whether that's Douglas or Jalen Brown or just whomever. I think they'll try and run a lot and try and get the running game going. I don't know how effective they'll be. We can talk about the offensive line here in a minute, but I do think they'll do that. On defense, I think they'll play the same way. I think they'll play bend, don't break a ton on defense. Don't get beat deep. Don't let Cade take off 55 yards like he did to open up the game against NC State. I think they'll try and slow things down based on a couple of conversations. I think they'll also, people have been begging for them to utilize Brock's legs and for them to utilize what he can do there. I think they will QB run some. And I think they'll be trying to be smart with it. I don't expect them to Michael Vick this thing or whatever. But I do, or Milrow, right? Like we saw last week. But I do think they'll try and take advantage of Brock's legs at times. Picky, choosy, 5 times this game, like not a ton. I've kind of been told to kind of watch out for the QB run a little bit. I think that's something that would be smart and would behoove them. And so I think they'll try and limit possessions. If it's another, I mean, you think about that, like Georgia Tech scored on 5 possessions of their 8, right? If Clemson only scores on 5 possessions of their 8, that's a max of 35 points, right? Like if Clemson only scores 35 in this, that's probably not the worst, right? That's probably not as bad as like some. And if they only score on 4 possessions, then you're keeping them in the 20s, right? And if those are field goals, then you're lowering that even more to like, if I told you right now, Richie, that Clemson was only going to score 24, which I don't expect that. I actually think it's going to be more than that. If I told you right now that Clemson was only going to score 24, that means you're probably not really getting blown out. Like you're probably losing like 24-10 or something, 24-13. I mean, you'd be pretty thrilled with that. The offense is going to probably get a touchdown or a field goal or 2. And so, yeah, I think that's the way they'll play. I do think that they'll try and limit mistakes. The worry I have with Brock is I just still don't think he's super accurate, right? I think he puts the ball on the guy. I mean, you mentioned 34% completion percentage. That's a little unfair. Man, even Keon and those guys had some drops in the ACC championship game. But even when so if the wide receivers and tight ends play super well and they do kind of catch everything, I think there's probably 20-25% of the passes that are going to be uncatchable. And that's not a shot at Brock. I don't think he's super accurate, right? I mean, 20% of DJ's passes haven't been catchable at this point in the year. And so I think that's probably something you're gonna have to look at too. Is man, not most, but a good chunk of his passes probably are not going to be super catchable anyway. And so you try and limit that. You try and give him really easy read stuff. I do think that a pro is he will move faster than DJ. He will, just mentally, physically, everything. Because I think DJ's been pretty banged up. And so I do think he'll move a little quicker. I think that'll help. I think he'll be a little more decisive. Now, is he going to be super accurate? Probably be less accurate than DJ if we're just keeping it a buck. But he'll move a little quicker. He'll look a little more confident. He'll look a little comfortable. I'll say this. I mean, he wasn't great in the Georgia game, but he looked like he had command of the offense. Like he didn't look like the moment was too big for him. Now, maybe in that game, he had 0 expectations and knew that we were going to lose and get blown out. So he just didn't, not that he didn't care, but like just didn't, I'm not like scared. Like we go out and play our best and see what happens. But all those things considering all those things combined, I really don't see a path to a Florida State victory, but I do see a path to like, if Florida State can do what they want to do and kind of capitalize on some situations, I think they can keep it somewhat close. If the defense plays out of their minds, maybe it's a game in the second half, maybe not. But I think they can keep it close enough to keep it respectable. And honestly, at the end of the day, you're a 14-point dog. I mean, Vegas is telling you you should keep it within 2 touchdowns. We'll see if you can. I think this is the best defense that Clemson will have played all year. I mean, there's really no doubts about that. I mean, but just between Tennessee and Clemson, NC State gave up 100 points, and neither one of those teams even tried in the fourth quarter. And so, 6 quarters of football, you give up to 100 points to those 2 teams, which do have really good offenses, don't get me wrong. But this is certainly the better defense that they've played. If the defense can kind of give a full max out effort, then I think they'll be fine. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. All that said, that 3-minute rant or whatever that ended up being, nobody timestamp it. My expectations for Brock aren't super high in this thing either. And fan base is kind of going to get what they asked for, right? Like, get them some reps for next year. If that matters, great. If not, we'll see. But, my expectations are not super, super high that he could be great. So any other thoughts on Brock, or want to move on to some other stuff?
No, I just, to your point, I do think confidence is not an issue with him. And we've heard that since he's got onto campus. He's going to go out there with confidence that, he can do the best he can. I think he understands limitations this offense has, whether it's the front 5 or the inconsistency with his receivers and tight ends. But I think he's going to go out there confident, and I don't think he's going to shy away from the moment, which is something you're afraid of sometimes when you have a young quarterback going in to a big night game at home. I don't think the moment will be too big for him. If he has a horrible game, I think it'll just be because Clemson's defense is that good and he's not that developed yet. It won't be because he's in his own head or anything like that. I truly think, his mindset is I'm going to go out there and just play my game and hopefully it works out.